Hello, everyone. I hope all is well and that everyone is taking care of themselves during this very, 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 very confusing time. Um, Today, I'm going to be giving my presentation on Angels in America, more specifically, the overarching theme of gender performance and the ways in which it's related to power struggles throughout the play. Um, Essentially, heteronormativity and power are, I guess, sort of conflated, and I'm going to focus specifically on the relationship between the dominant Roy Con and the submissive Joe Pitt to show the implications of this structure dynamic. And if anyone has any questions or comments or concerns, be sure to jot them down and bring them to the Google Meet on Friday. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a quote that we sort of briefly looked at in one of our prior meetings. It's on page 46, and it's towards the end of when Roy is diagnosed with AIDS. He says, "This is not sophistry, and this is not hypocrisy. This is reality. I have sex with men, but unlike nearly every other man of whom this is true, I bring the guy I'm screwing to the White House, and President Reagan smiles at us and shakes his hand, because what I am is defined entirely by who I am. Roy Khan is not a homosexual. Roy Khan is a heterosexual man, Henry, who fucks around with other guys." So, I found this quote specifically really interesting because I think it's here that we most directly see Roy's revulsion towards vulnerability. And in this specific case, he believes being diagnosed with AIDS strips him of his masculinity and therefore, in a way, separates him from his power. So essentially, to Roy, having sex with other men does not define him because of the status that he holds and continues to reveal outwardly to society. He Prior to saying this, he refers to homosexuality as lacking clout, which he's made super clear that he thinks he has. And he views his power as a direct reflection of his masculinity. And to label himself a homosexual man would be an erasure of his identity, which he's worked so hard to pave for himself. And it's in this scene that we're introduced to his internal struggle, and we see the ways in which his outward hyper-masculine gender performance serves as a denial towards his true self. Okay, so I had to turn some lights on because it got very dark in here very fast, but I'm gonna shift the discussion over to Joe and focus on the ways in which he as an individual suppresses his identity as a result of the shame that he feels towards it. And then after this, I'm gonna slide on over to the nature of the relationship between Roy and Joe and the implications of their interactions. So, first of all, I want to look at Act 1, Scene 6. It's page 30, I think. Yeah, 30. And it's where Joe and Lewis meet for the first time in the bathroom of their job. The dialogue itself is like pretty chaotic and choppy given the circumstances. And it's here that Lewis refers to Joe as a gay Republican, to which Joe immediately becomes flustered and defensive, and he doesn't know how to respond to the label placed upon him by Lewis. He's very awkward in his response, as Lewis has just exposed the very part of him that he's attempted to suppress, given his affiliation with the religion of Mormonism. And I think this interaction does the work of beginning to display Joe's deep-rooted insecurities regarding his sexuality. His vehement denial, like Roy's, is a mechanism to keep himself from becoming displaced within the communities that he surrounds himself with. So, building off of this idea of insecurity and the idea that Joe's outward gender performance reflects something he's not, I want to move ahead to Act 1, Scene 8, which depicts a very dramatic insight towards Joe's perception of his own identity. In this particular scene, he's fighting with Harper about his sexuality, and he states, "Does it make any difference that I might be one thing deep within, no matter how wrong or ugly that thing is, so long as I have fought with everything I have to kill it? And then he goes on to say, "For God's sake, there's nothing left. I'm a shell. There's nothing left to kill. As long as my behavior is what I know it has to be, decent, correct." So basically, Joe finds power in Mormonism and his religious identity, hence his reluctance to disassociate from the institution. He would rather deny himself the right to express himself and assume the role of a husband in an unhappy heteronormative relationship in order to be accepted rather than exist in the open. It's here that we see his relationship with Harper as a mechanism to maintain power. He wants to be the healer rather than to be the one who needs to be healed. And like Roy, he maintains a performative sense of identity and he masks his true self from the public eye. Finally, I want to look at the nature of the dynamic between Roy and Joe. The relationship is depicted as one rooted in Roy's dominance and Joe's submissive tendencies, which I kind of saw it to be like possibly commenting on the heteronormative structures that manage to infiltrate homosexual partnerships or identities. So when we're first introduced to Roy and Joe in Act 1, Scene 2, Roy is presented as a very demanding, arrogant character who's continuously silencing Joe as a means of asserting his masculine dominance. In this interaction between two closeted homosexual men, we see the appearance of a heteronormative dynamic as Roy portrays himself as overbearingly masculine, while Joe assumes the stereotypically feminine role of apologetic and vulnerable. To both characters, homosexuality or deviating from the expected norms served as a blockade to the life that they wanted to lead. Therefore, Roy tends to overcompensate while Joe typically retreats and hides. And we see the progression of their bond throughout the play, and specifically in Act 3, Scene 5, we watch it reach its climax as Joe denies the opportunity to go to Washington. When Roy finds this out, he's outraged, and Joe responds by telling Roy that he loves him. However, as we've previously seen, Joe continually struggles to put feelings of love before his morality, hence his hiding his sexuality to keep up with his Mormon faith. There is a transition where Roy's power is threatened while Joe maintains his status as religiously pious. And then after finding this out, Roy responds to this threat through quick transitions of masculine violence to tender gestures, ultimately becoming entirely violent and full of rage. The stage notes state that with sudden violence, Roy grabs Joe's lapel and pulls him close, shaking him violently. Joe responds violently, placing him in an outwardly masculine role that we hadn't really seen before this scene. Overall, there's like a sense of unresolved tension, as well as the shattering of a dynamic that provided normalcy in the lives of both the characters, where Roy dominated and Joe successfully concealed himself. And overall, I think this specific dynamic reflected the issues of concealment within various relationships and like the problematic tendencies of applying heteronormative structures within one's life. So yeah, that is basically everything I had to say. If you have any questions or comments or issues or anything you'd like to say at all, bring them to the Google Meet and we will address them and discuss them, and it will be a great time. Yeah, I will see you all in class. Have an amazing night.